Dead people don't recover. People recover when they get to take the lead on defining what that recovery looks like.
We're in Philadelphia. Kensington is the hot topic, if you would.
It is considered the largest open-air drug market on the East Coast. And the next thing you know, xylazine shows up. And now we've got people with all of these wounds. And we're looking at amputations on people in their 20s and their 30s. We want a viable, thriving neighborhood for families and people to live in, to raise their children in. People who are using drugs and sleeping on the street, we want them to be able to have services so that they can get better. Housing is an essential component of any harm reduction philosophy, of any harm reduction practice, and about a third of those individuals, about 250 of them, we've transferred to permanent housing.
We cannot wrest our way out of homelessness.
Yeah, or a substance use crisis. We have to use the tools that we already know work, and we have to be willing to try new ones.
Today we're joined by Kate Perch, who is the lead program officer for housing and harm reduction services at Prevention Point in Kensington, Philadelphia. And we just uploaded a documentary featuring the crisis in Kensington and what Prevention Point is doing to help people. This is a conversation that is so vital to preventing and solving homelessness. We need treatment plus harm reduction plus housing all working together if we're going to prevent and solve homelessness.
We're in Philadelphia. When you think of homelessness in Philadelphia, Kensington is the hot topic, if you would. You are lead program officer, housing and harm reduction. Housing and harm reduction in the same title.
Absolutely.
So obviously you work with housing and harm reduction.
Yep.
I don't hear those two together. Obviously, housing is harm reduction.
100%.
Talk about that.
Talk about how housing is harm reduction?
Or anywhere you want to start.
Yes, I'm the lead program officer for housing and harm reduction at Prevention Point, Philadelphia. And so I work with our programs, all of what I would call our entry-level programs. So programs where people that are living on the street are going to come in and kind of seek initial services with us. So that includes our prevention services, which is our syringe exchange and our overdose prevention. That's our drop-in center. And that's also our low barrier emergency shelter. So for me, all of those things intersect with each other. And housing is an essential component of any harm reduction philosophy, of any harm reduction practice, because anything that we are doing that provides safety, security, and stability for people is life-sustaining. I appreciate that you say we don't hear those words very often, because we don't, and we need to hear them together more.
Right.
Because they are so integral to each other. Providing drop-in services, providing harm reduction supplies, all of those things are essential. If we can get people inside and in a safe and stable place that they can call a home, that's going to make all of that, all those other things even more successful and more stable.
When the public hears harm reduction, probably for most people, needle exchange, they give out needles and pipes.
Yep.
That's probably the dominant paradigm when they hear.
Absolutely.
And then they immediately go to, well, they're enabling.
Yep.
And I like to respond, yeah, they're enabling people to stay alive.
Absolutely.
People use drugs to escape pain. Homelessness is hell. So whatever trauma they went through before that caused their homelessness, and then being outside just creates more trauma. You want to escape the pain.
We're creating a cycle, really, right? So oftentimes substance use might have been a contributing factor to how someone entered into homelessness, and it's then going to become part of how they maintain homelessness. It also, unfortunately, can still sometimes be a reason that people re-enter it, right? Because we're still working on how we create systemic change that embraces these philosophies across all the different components of what we're doing, right? You mentioned we're enabling people living. We like to say dead people don't recover.
I'm so glad you say that, because I say that too, and I get criticism for saying it. Just glad there's somebody else.
People are in a cycle, right? All different things, whether it's poverty, trauma, substance use, mental health issues, all of those things are going to contribute potentially to how someone enters homelessness, and they're all going to contribute to how they maintain it. So where we can come in is, how do we start to create breaks in that cycle? How do we create exit ramps out of that spiraling highway? And housing is one component of that. And yes, providing safe supplies while people are in active use is one tool in a toolbox. It is one piece of a continuum of recovery-oriented services that give people opportunity to move towards stabler choices in their lives.
Here in Philadelphia, you have new political pressure, we'll put it. Harm reduction is under attack. I read a story yesterday. I didn't notice when it was posted, but they're trying to even stop mobile services. That's insane.
It's a challenge to one of the core components of harm reduction, which is meeting people where they are. And I know that that's a phrase that has been sort of, it's core of harm reduction, but really it's the core of any comprehensive social services effort, right? Whether it's homeless services, mental health services, any of those things. The best way to engage with people and like start those interactions with people, build trust with people, is to do that in the community.
Right.
So we have to be able to go out and find people where they're staying, where they're engaging in all of their other needs, because that's where we can start to build that relationship and say, hey, I see you for who you are right now. No judgment, no expectation. I just want to get to know you. I want to get to know what your needs are and figure out how I get you to the next step. Somebody else who has worked with our agency once really said it so beautifully, and I'm going to completely butcher it, but they talked about harm reduction is about meeting you where you are and then figuring out how to get you to the next step. And I think that's the piece that people often meet. They hear meeting people where they are and they're like, and then you just want to keep them there. No, meeting people where they are is how we start that trust and that relationship to get them to the next place. And we have to be able to do that in the community, in the places where people currently are.
Ian DeJong said in this podcast, he believes recovery works best when people want to recover. And you're walking along somebody, unconditional love, no judgment, saying, okay, you're doing drugs or may have some other, what we would call destructive behavior. We're going to love on you until you can love on yourself.
Yeah.
Whatever path you go on, by providing that support, it helps people get on a path to recovery and sobriety or whatever they choose. I know for me, I've been asked, well, how did you get it? How are you sober? How are you no longer homeless? And the more I think about it, somebody helped me before I loved on myself. And it was that simple, right? And there was a lot of people. Even after I got sober, there was a lot of people that helped me, probably help me to this day. And that's what we need to get to, is helping our neighbors.
Yeah. And not just, I would say it's not just people recover when they want to recover. It's people recover when they get to take the lead on defining what that recovery looks like.
Ooh, when they take agency and
when
ownership.
they take agency and when they're given options. We get so caught up in, oh, you promote that one thing and that's not the right, that, we can't give supplies to people, or, oh, you're too recovery focused. You can't, like you're only offering housing to people who are. Some people want that. Some people need that. These are all tools in that toolbox. These are all like things on the spectrum that we can offer to people because people need options. There is no one size fits all to ending the drug epidemic. There's no one size fits all to ending homelessness. We have to be able to tailor to people's needs and to how people want to take that journey, and recognize that it's not going to look the same for everybody and that there's going to be pitfalls, right? Even me on my best day, right? Sometimes I slip up. I have a bad day. I don't eat the way I wanted to eat that day. I don't sleep the way I wanted to sleep that night. That doesn't mean that I'm off my diet or that I'm off of getting a better sleep schedule. It means that I have to pick up and figure out, what do I need to do differently to try again?
And when you're outside hopeless, it's hard to make those changes or even want to make those changes. I never did fentanyl. I never did trank. Was addicted to heroin and meth. There was a point where I needed drugs more than I needed air. It took over my life. And you look at Kensington and you see a lot on YouTube these days, or TikTok.
Unfortunately.
They like to use the word zombie, which I will only use this one time. I could see the reaction there.
Yeah.
This is horse tranquilizer. And it's not that people are saying, you know what? what? I'm going to wake up today and I'm going to do trank.
Yeah, nobody wants this. We are on an uphill battle against an illicit drug supply that is always 5 steps ahead of us. I came to Prevention Point 10 years ago. I was a social work intern. I had been working mostly in recovery-oriented housing. I was tired of being asked to be involved in evictions where I was putting people back into homelessness almost entirely because they were using drugs. Yeah. And so when I had a chance to do my social work internship, I said, put me at Prevention Point. I want to learn what they're doing. When I started, fentanyl was like a periphery concept. You couldn't get naloxone without a prescription. I would say it was 2 years into my time that we first started to see fentanyl. And we went from overdose being a thing that we knew we needed to be aware of to, I think it was 15 people one day fell out around our building. And that was an eye-opener for us. We figured out how we addressed that. We flooded the streets with naloxone. We worked with people around overdose prevention. And then the next thing you know, xylazine shows up. And now we've got people with all of these wounds. And we're looking at amputations on people in their 20s and their 30s. We weren't ready for that. Now we have metamidine, which I'm probably mispronouncing. I apologize.
I was wondering what's next.
We now have a new animal tranquilizer that is coming up consistently in the drug supply, similar but more potent to xylazine. So we're constantly playing catch up to the illicit drug supply.
Folks that have never done drugs, most folks, can't understand there's a point where these drugs take over your life and then it's maintaining, right? You're not doing it for fun. You're not doing it to get high. There's no real high feeling left. You're doing it so you don't get sick.
You're staving off multiple withdrawals now because now you're withdrawing from a high potency opioid with fentanyl and multiple high potency tranquilizers. Less naloxone becoming available and being something that we can use, right? Like that was a key component in managing the rise of fentanyl in Philadelphia and other places. We don't have a street response, and we're still figuring out what withdrawal management looks like from the trank, right? There's great work coming out of hospitals and other medical systems and treatment providers. It's constant. That system is always going to be one step ahead of us. And that system's so much bigger than Philadelphia, right? Like it's not some master person in Philadelphia making this plan. This is happening. This is a global phenomenon. And we are just one cog in the wheel where unfortunately people are dying and people are suffering. I think it's also important to say that people are dying and people are suffering. And there are people like Prevention Point, like Savage Sisters, like so many other groups that are working to respond to it and provide compassionate care.
And now you have politicians, and it's not just Philadelphia. We're in Philadelphia, so we're going to talk about it here, that are trying to stop needle exchange. They're trying to stop mobile. And it's going to make everything worse because there's a big component of harm reduction that is also public safety and public health.
And there certainly has been a lot of things written about the concerns around a potential uptick in HIV infections. The important thing to remember is that our work continues. We are continuing to maintain that program and maintain that service. And it's our hope that we will continue to get support to fill in that gap. Thankfully, this administration is continuing to support some of our other efforts, including our shelter program, which is a national model for how to provide low barrier emergency housing to people that are using drugs. So, it can feel especially when you're reading all those news stories, right? It can feel like it's a really hard time, and it is, but the work continues. And our job as a provider and as one part of the solution to this is to figure out how do we keep working together to move the solution forward, because we can be angry at what politicians are doing. We can be angry at what detractors might be saying. There are still folks that need our services. And so our job is to figure out how we maintain those services and provide that care.
Now, is your shelter in Kensington?
It is actually. It is on the campus of Temple Episcopal Hospital. So it's about 5 blocks from our main location.
I'm trying to think how to phrase this because pretty much everybody's going to know Kensington, but they probably have, as we said earlier, a harmful paradigm that they hold on to. Explain Kensington.
Kensington is a neighborhood in Philadelphia that historically was a heart of industry. It was a very industrial neighborhood. And so like many other neighborhoods in Philadelphia and across the nation, as you saw the sort of the deindustrialization movement of the 70s and 80s, you saw the depletion of economic power in that neighborhood. Philadelphia, well known to be the poorest of the largest cities in the US. Kensington contains some of the poorest zip codes within the poorest city. When we think about large-scale homelessness, and even when we tie it to substance use, I think a lot of people think about West Coast communities like San Francisco, Portland, Phoenix. What we're not dealing with here is like a housing. This is not everybody who needs affordable housing got pushed out. This is everybody is in an economic bind here. It's unique in that way when you think about other communities that are facing.
Explain that. I don't quite get what you're saying.
We're not at the point in Philadelphia. We haven't quite tipped over in Philadelphia like the affordable housing crisis point. So we're no longer at the place where, what is it in San Francisco now? You have to be able to make X thousands of dollars. Right. We're not there yet in Philadelphia.
So housing is still reasonable?
Reasonable-ish, let's say. We're not facing what you're seeing in places like San Francisco, Phoenix, LA, where you've got these incredibly costly housing units right up against large-scale homelessness. It's a much more nuanced situation here. And we still have what I think, at least on the national level, would be considered affordable market housing. Kensington, it's a community that is struggling. It's like person living in substandard housing is struggling with the fact that they're struggling and there's a person living in a tent outside their house. So it's a different situation.
The whole community is struggling.
Exactly. It's a community that also has a lot of really rich and beautiful history. It's a place where a lot of different hard economic realities are intersecting. So you've got a lot of families that are living below the poverty line. You've got a huge amount of street homelessness. And for years, long before the opioid epidemic was the hot thing in the media, this was sort of the epicenter of substance use in Philadelphia. And it's just kind of maintained that for a long time. And as the drug epidemic grew and as the overdose crisis grew, it unfortunately has just maintained that reputation. Going back to what I was saying earlier, we're not dealing with an issue of neighborhoods and communities where you have a lot of wealthy, higher income individuals. There's not that component to this. This is not a house. Does that make sense? It's not a housing crisis issue.
If you go to the Tenderloin in San Francisco,
right,
you're right up against, these luxury high rises.
Mm-hmm. We're not there yet.
So, but it is still an issue with the cost of housing because people, they're struggling and, it's just a very economic rundown area.
It is, yeah.
So it's just not up against the luxury housing that you would see in other communities.
Yeah, it certainly is coming. Philadelphia has been going through something of a development boom, and so it's coming, but that's just not what we're dealing with right now. It is a neighborhood that has been through a lot, for many, many decades, and it is a place where a lot of people live and work and do amazing things every day. And unfortunately, it is considered the largest open-air drug market on the East Coast, possibly in the country, but it's a really vibrant community at the same time.
Personally, I'm strange, but I would rather hang out with people in Kensington than I'm going to use Beverly Hills because I'm sure there's a affluent neighborhood in Philadelphia. Mm-hmm. I just don't know what it's called, but I find people on the street so much more honest and real.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of sort of us versus them, right? It's there's the people on the street and there's the people in the neighborhood. And it's obviously not that black and white, right? We have a lot of folks that are working at Prevention Point live in Kensington. So they are members of that community. There are people who are housed individuals who are using substances. There are people who are unhoused who aren't using substances. And then we bring in the actual drug trade. That is unfortunately a economic factor, right, in any community where this is happening on this scale. And so, I think a lot of times we really want to polarize and say, well, you just need to understand this. And everything is mixed together. And when you get folks in the room and you can kind of get people past the very legitimate frustration that comes from just this being such an entrenched issue, what you find is that we all really kind of want the same things, right? We want a viable, thriving neighborhood for families and people to live in, to raise their children in. And we want people who are using drugs and sleeping on the street, we want them to be able to have services so that they can do what they need to do to get better. We
What
all want the same thing.
What I think is ironic, the people that complain about open air drug use, or the people that complain about homeless people using drugs outside, also complain about overdose prevention centers that they wouldn't see it, right? They're just complaining. The truth is, majority of people addicted to substances live in houses and will never experience homelessness. And you don't see it because they're out behind walls.
But that's why we have to put all these conversations together, right? So that's why we have to talk about housing and harm reduction in the same spaces. That's why we have to create.
That's where I was going. You took my lead.
We have to create those spaces. And that's why we created a space like that at Prevention Point. That's why we created a shelter, because we knew that it was necessary.
Oh my gosh, you even did the transition to the shelter. So tell me about the low barrier shelter that is the model everybody's looking at.
It probably the thing I'm the proudest of at Prevention Point, partially because the way that I got hired at Prevention Point was that I happened to be around interning when they got the green light to do the first pilot. So I've been able to watch this program from start to finish. So we started piloting shelter for folks that we're actively using in Kensington in 2015. And initially we were just doing what, some people call winter initiative or winter overflow. We had beds that were only open during the winter because, like a lot of East Coast cities, Philadelphia, oftentimes there are more people Code blue, exactly. People want to come inside during the winter. So Philadelphia, like many other northern and eastern cities, opens more beds. And so for the first few years, that's all we did. We went year round with shelter, I believe, in 2018. And we've been in our current facility since 2021. It's called Beacon House. We have 69 beds. All of them are specifically for people that are living on the streets in Kensington and actively using some form of substances. Obviously, most of our folks have like some sort of co-occurring mental health thing going on. So we're what's called a direct access shelter. So, you don't have to go to a centralized intake center. We have our homeless outreach team and outreach teams from Project Home and other Philadelphia agencies that are out on the street in Kensington, and they get to refer directly into our beds. We do all the things that I think you often hear people talk about that shelters have in place. We try not to do them. So we do have security, but it's like external security. You don't get patted down. You don't get searched. No one's going through your bag when you come through the door. If you come in and you've used something, and the best thing that you can do in that moment is like sit on a couch in the living room and have someone keep an eye on you for 4 hours, that's what we're going to do because we want you to be safe and inside. It's very much a congregate space. So it's open floor. So people don't have rooms. That's a safety precaution. That's so that we can constantly be monitoring people as a way to prevent overdose. We have had loss in our shelter program. I don't want to pretend that that's not a factor, but I would say that considering that we serve almost exclusively a population that is using substances and opioids in particular, we've had very little loss, and we're incredibly proud of that. We don't require you to necessarily be working on drug treatment, although we certainly do encourage it. We have offered drug treatment on site. We connect everyone there to all of the other services that Prevention Point offers. And I believe that we've served close to 800 people since we went year round. And about a third of those individuals, about 250 of them, we've transferred to permanent housing as a result of their time with us.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Now I'm excited because we're visiting tomorrow.
Yeah. We're really excited for you to see. It's so cool. I think a lot of people, when they first hear about it, they're like, oh, like congregate shelter. People think of that vision of huge programs with hundreds of beds. Right. I mean, we're smaller. People make it their home. And when you go in there, people talk about you walk in and you feel like this is people's home. Well,
I'm not a big supporter of congregate shelters, but as you said earlier, it's going to take a little bit of everything. Mm-hmm. There's no right one path. Mm-hmm. If congregate shelters are set up that provide people dignity, which I love how you say, we don't do the things that everybody else in the other shelters talking about security and pat downs and all that. The point is it a safe place that provides dignity and gives people a path with their own agency on their own terms to move to the next step, something we talked about, with a focus on eventually going into housing and treatment if they so choose.
Yeah. I will also say the critiques of congregate shelter are real and they are valid. And people, especially in Kensington right now, are often living in community on the street. And so there is something to be said for creating safe spaces where that type of community can be maintained.
Right.
We have people that want to be in that type of communal space. And that's, I think that's especially in a world where we're so used to thinking of like housing is you have your own apartment or your own house or just one roommate. It's hard for us to conceptualize that can be something that people want and feel supported in, but it really can be. And to your point, part of why we were so supportive and willing to do congregate shelter and have continued to do it is that while we are continuing to work to create more permanent housing opportunities, particularly for our folks, we're not going to leave people out on the street while we do that.
There has to be some consideration of availability.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Right?
Yep.
So as a solution, what I saw a couple hours on Kensington the other day, the police activity, and, I'm just speculating here. It could have been a lot of things, right? But, and I spend time in the Tenderloin and the zone in Phoenix and Skid Row. The police activity was constant every couple of minutes. And we saw, which is very common also to the Tenderloin, Skid Row, and the zone, police moving people just around the corner, right? And then they're going to go over there and move them, creating a congregate shelter to get people off the streets instead of pushing them around.
Absolutely.
Makes so much more sense.
Right.
Why isn't that the model the city is?
Our hope is that as we continue to show the good work that we're doing, we will continue to see that model grow. The other thing that it does is it creates a captive audience. When you give people a place to stay, you give them a place to consistently come and be engaged. So to your point, I met Joe on this corner and we started an application for his birth certificate and we got his welfare turned on, but now his food stamp card is going to get sent to the mailing address over here. Oh, wait, I come back 2 days later. Joe's not on that corner anymore. So now I have to find Joe. We even did it's silly little stuff, right? But the shelter is set up so that if you come down the stairs or you get off the elevator, you have to walk past the case manager's offices to get out of the building. So your case manager can reach out the door and be like, Joe, don't wait. I just need you to sign this.
So I was an outreach case manager for 4 years, off and on. And what I mean off and on, the other time they had me as a family case manager. And I'm divorced, no goldfish. So why they had me working with families, I don't know. It was a wonderful experience. The city of Los Angeles would do winter shelters. And
does it get cold enough in Los Angeles to do?
Yeah. The city of Los Angeles did winter shelters. What I liked the best was that my clients, I could get a hold of them. I knew where they were for those 3 months. And we would target it. We'd say, well, we know for 3 months they're going here every night.
Yep.
So we can, strategize and target and hopefully get them off the streets. When people are out and about, they could be in jail. They could be just pushed to another corner. They could have medical issues.
Yep.
Who knows?
Yeah.
It's harder to get people the help they need when you can't find them.
Yeah. The other thing we do that I think is great. So we have a homeless outreach team. It's a city contracted team. So it's one of multiple agencies that go out and do outreach in Philadelphia. And our team is based out of the shelter. And that's purposefully because they're making referrals in, but also so that, sometimes people decide the shelter is not for them. It's fine. We do have boundaries. People like you guys have no rules. We do have rules. Most of them relate to violent behavior and aggressive behavior. So sometimes people we like to call them breaks from the space. You take a little pause or a longer pause. Sometimes, obviously like systems like incarceration, those things are, our folks are getting mixed up in that. So the outreach team is very tuned in to all that movement. Yeah. So as soon as somebody is no longer a resident, they can pick up that person's care. They're in the same Philadelphia's coordinated entry, which is how we're linking people into long-term housing. We can transfer the case directly over to them so people aren't losing their place sort of like the housing queue. We're connecting all of that.
Are you operating housing housing also?
We are not. We currently only operate shelter and outreach.
The path to the housing.
Yes. So, Philadelphia, like a lot of other municipalities in this country, are now functioning under what the federal government calls a coordinated entry system. Right. That's where we kind of sit uniquely. So we're direct access. So you don't have to go through a central intake to get to us. But once you are placed with us, you are in the same pool of housing as you would be if you went to any other city shelter.
How do we solve this crisis?
Oh, gosh.
Easy question, right?
Yeah, right. It's totally simple. It's going to take a little bit of everything and a little bit of everybody. It is going to take our city government continuing to support the programs that they are supporting and hearing some of the feedback when they are pushing back, hearing some of the feedback about why that could not benefit folks. It's going to take groups, nonprofits like Prevention Point and all the different community groups that are doing work out there to continue to be responsive to what the needs of people on the street are. Recognize that we are doing this in a community that is looking for resolution and safety. And it's going to take all of us coming together to the table and really thinking outside the box. It's going to take, state level changes. It's potentially going to take federal level change. It's really going to take some creative out of the box thinking and some willingness. When we started, people ask how did you figure out how to do this shelter? And I'm like, we did a lot of throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what stuck. And a lot of stuff didn't stick. And we had to be like, well, that didn't work. We're going to try something else. And there's gotta be a willingness to do that and just take bold risks. Yeah. It's going to take more places for people to come inside. It's treatment beds that meet the specific needs that people have now. It's treatment beds that have a medical level for wound care. Yeah,
treatment beds that are connected to housing.
Yes, this is so important. We have to stop siloing for so many years. This is not just a Philly thing, right? This is so many places. It's like housing is over here and medical care is over here and behavioral health is over here. They're all connected. Yeah. They're all connected and they have to talk to each other. We have to challenge things like the 90-day HUD policy around losing your homelessness status. We have to think creatively. We've done it in Philly. We have a long-term residential insurance-covered treatment program. You maintain your status so that you can access housing for homeless people. It can be done. People often sit there and go, we can't possibly do this thing. And oftentimes we've actually done it.
You might need to explain that. I know what you're talking about.
Oh, so
you lose your housing.
So there's being homeless and then there's being chronically homeless, which is like you're really homeless for a long period of time is the best way I can simplify it. And within the federal government, there's rules, guidelines around when and how a person can be considered literally homeless, right? And one of them has to do with the fact that if you are in some kind of institution, so if it's a jail, a medical rehab, or even like a behavioral health rehab, if you're there for more than 90 days, you're considered housed within that institution.
And you lose your housing.
You lose your status. But it also means, you might have been linked to housing prior to going into that institution. And now when you exit, you don't actually qualify for that housing that you were linked to prior because you don't meet the criteria anymore. Right. So we have to be willing to think about how we can challenge those things. And like I said, we've done it.
Yeah.
We've done a lot of these things. Sometimes it's a question of how do we scale them up. Much of this is not as insurmountable as I think we often feel that it is.
This is not the first time this conversation has come up. And there's others that are working to circumvent the HUD rules so that people can go into treatment and then go into housing, because otherwise they're just exited back to the streets where you're going to drink and use again. Mm-hmm. Or, as you said, people are in housing and they're saying, I want to get sober. And then they go into a treatment center. Their stuff is still in their bedroom and they have their place.
Yeah.
I mean, that's so important.
It starts with just being communicative with each other, across our agencies, across our systems, and saying, we all want the same thing. We want people to succeed. We want people to thrive. And so we just have to communicate. The other thing that I will say how do we solve this problem is we have to work on the stigma aspect. We have to we have to continue to show people locally, nationally, everywhere that these are people. These are your friends. These are your family members. Before the mics were on, we were talking about all those people that are out recording. That's not doing anything to change this narrative. And it breaks my heart.
Yeah.
Really
I started Invisible People 15 years ago to educate the public on homelessness. A lot of the pushback even came from the homeless sector. They they said that I was highlighting the negative. But I saw that to humanize homelessness, you have to share stories of homeless people that somebody could relate. Oh, that's like my sister-in-law. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I went through that too. They start having a new understanding of homelessness. Somehow it has gotten to this point, Kensington and other places, the term is creator, but I want to call them something else.
Yeah.
They're going in there to create sensationalized content for the agenda of getting clicks, views, and money. They're monetizing
Absolutely.
the humans, and they say, oh, we're doing this because people need to see it. Every city in America, you see addiction outside. People see it. They turn on the news, scroll your Twitter feed, they see it.
What really pains me is that you're not just stigmatizing and harming the people that you're filming on the street. You're stigmatizing and harming that entire community. You know, imagine what it must be like if you're a young person and you're going off to college and, you know, where are you from? Oh, I live in Kensington in Philadelphia. You live in Kensington? I've seen like, what is that? How does that help anybody in this neighborhood? There's so much beauty. Look, there's a lot going on in Kensington that needs to be better. And there's also so many things in Kensington that need to be raised up, so many things that need to be highlighted. And when you just drive down the street in a car, you're not telling any of that story, and you're not giving any opportunity to anyone in that community to be seen differently.
And somebody's standing there nodding. The camera rolls. They call them whatever names. They don't understand, or it's never explained why that person is using drugs, how they've tried to get off drugs, that it's not even a choice anymore for them. I feel it's pushing criminalization because then people are saying, oh, they're just criminal drug addicts. Let's just lock them up. Some of them even say, let's put them in jail so they get sober.
Yep.
There's huge amount of drugs in jail. People go into jail, they don't normally get better, they come out worse. And then they have more pain and more problems, and they're going to end up doing drugs. Now we even have bad actors that are using this, whether it be video or photos of people suffering of addiction and mental illness, to push for criminalization. I mean, there's an organized, well-funded that's using all these images. We cannot arrest our way out of homelessness.
Absolutely not. We can't arrest our way out of homelessness, and we
Or
can't,
addiction.
or a substance use crisis. We have to use the tools that we already know work, and we have to be willing to try new ones. And that's what we're doing every day at Prevention Point. That's what so many other groups are doing every day in Kensington. And we're going to continue doing it because people are still going, no matter what happens, there are still going to be people out there that need our services, and we are going to continue to maintain them no matter what.
How do people find you?
Prevention Point Philadelphia, we can be found at ppponline.org. Don't confuse us with Prevention Point Pittsburgh. They also do amazing work over on the other side of the state, but different place. ppponline.org. Our website tells you when all of our services are available. So if you or anybody that you know or love is in need of public health or harm reduction services, they can find out all about them there.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for talking to me.
Thank you very much. It was great to be here.
If you made it this far, that means you like this podcast, and we're grateful that you spent time with us. Please rate this podcast, leave a review, and if you can, we need your help to keep this podcast going. Invisiblepeople.tv/donate. Please give a gift of any size.